January 20th.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Day one of the Joe Biden presidency. He took office under historic conditions, a global pandemic and riots. Unlike anything the country had seen since President Roosevelt and World War II. But the president began his term determined not to let historic political tensions stop him.
My whole soul is in this, bringing America together.
And while a presidency lasts 4 years, the first 100 days is a historic benchmark. For the next 30 minutes, we take a look at what the Biden White House has gotten done. This is the first 100 days. I'm Joe St. George in Washington. To some degree, this city looks the same as when President Biden took office. This fence around the White House was here on Inauguration Day. It's here today. But while D.C. may look the same, there have been plenty of changes from President Biden and plenty of Americans wanting more or less from the commander-in-chief. If there was one goal of President Biden coming into office, it was to get more people vaccinated and more people employed. On the vaccine front, the U.S. was vaccinating around 1 million a day when President Biden came into office. Now the country is vaccinating over 3 million each day. President Biden met his goal of administering 100 million COVID-19 vaccine doses 42 days ahead of schedule. The other big goal of President Biden, pass a stimulus bill to help Americans most in need. Americans like Jamel Fleming, who we met in Florida.
They just started laying eggs just recently.
To find out if the stimulus package,
Well, guess we're not eating today, boys.
will help those most in need. It helps to go to a place that's most likely a bit different from your home.
We're nice to our gators here.
There are alligators, chickens, water comes from the well, showers take place outside.
Ultimately, moving out here was the only smart option.
Jamel Fleming didn't always call this home. Prior to the pandemic, he lived in West Palm Beach, Florida. Nowadays, he lives outside Orlando, in Paisley, in this trailer on property owned by his girlfriend's parents. A layoff at the start of the pandemic left him no choice.
West Palm wasn't set up for the pandemic. With the high rent, with the high electric, with the high utilities.
Since his first layoff last March, Jamel has had a few jobs, but also a few more layoffs. He's currently out of work and the type of person Congress is trying to help.
Finding something that's long-lasting, especially in a year after the pandemic, is hard to do. Me personally, right now, I would say I'm about 2.5 to about 3 months behind on just my personal payments.
So how does this stimulus package help Jamel? Well, he qualified for $300 weekly unemployment benefits. He also received a $1,400 stimulus check. What's the first thing you're going to do when you get your $1,400 stimulus check?
The first thing I'm going to do is probably put it towards bills, honestly.
But even though Jamel is getting something from Washington, he isn't exactly elated. He doesn't have kids, so he's not getting an expanded child tax credit, and he's also not going to see a minimum wage bump. That's out of the law. Rental assistance is nice, he says, but he's no longer paying rent. All of this is actually leaving him frustrated. President Biden isn't doing more to get him what he really wants, a job.
Honestly, I don't see anything that's going to help me. I mean, and that's just me being completely honest. $1,400 is, I mean, it's going to be nice for the first 2 weeks, but I'd rather work for it. I would much rather them give us some sort of incentive to go back to work and fund us that way than, just paying us more to sit at home.
Our first conversation with Jamel taking place in early March, but within the last few days, we revisited him in Florida.
And I feel like I'm a productive member of society again.
He now has a job, and we asked him about how he thinks President Biden's first 100 days is going. Jamel, we should note, voted for former President Trump.
The sense out here is that, I can definitely say that the temperature is lowered down a bit, that people aren't so volatile about their political views, so that is definitely something that has changed. And honestly, I can attest that to him.
One major change ushered in during these first 100 days is a big change to the child tax credit, which parents and guardians will start seeing later this summer. And as we found out, the benefit is set to benefit those most in need.
One thing we were just stunned with is when we opened up what the need was.
When scenes like this appeared before the holidays, many were shocked. Now, months later, they continue to play out, week after week in cities big and small, car after car, waiting for food.
It's a nice little package that they get.
John Ross helps run the Nourishing Bethesda food distribution site. How serious is America's hunger crisis? Well, this is taking place in one of America's wealthiest counties, Montgomery County, Maryland. Some cars are fancier than others here, a sign of how all income levels have been impacted.
COVID is kind of an equal opportunity job slayer.
On this day,
it can get pretty crowded.
Bill is first in line for food.
I've been out of work for a while, and I'm pretty damn desperate.
He didn't always like coming here, but he swallowed his pride.
Peanut butter and jelly.
Because he needed to feed his kids.
Because they last. I'd rather be working for my food and whatnot, but I'm surviving.
Well, help for Bill and others was included in the new stimulus package. It included $1,400 stimulus checks, $300 a week bonus unemployment aid, a 15% increase in food stamp benefits through September, and an expansion of the child tax credit, which will perhaps have the biggest impact on poverty and hunger. The way it was previously written, some of America's poorest families didn't qualify. Now they not only qualify, but payments will be available monthly. Previously, you had to report at least $3,000 in earnings to the IRS to receive it. Under the stimulus bill, all married couples earning less than $150,000 a year qualify for the expanded child tax credit. $3,000 will be given for each child who is between 6 to 17 years of age. $3,600 will be given for each child under the age of 6. Half of the total amount will be paid out in monthly installments starting in July.
That's a big potato.
For Bill, that means at least $250 a month.
I could easily survive and not have to do this with $200 a month.
The stimulus, though, only created this program for this year, but there's already a new push in Congress to make it permanent. The two senators responsible for crafting the credit, Democratic Senators Sherrod Brown of Ohio and Michael Bennet of Colorado, telling us they hope future legislation this year will make the money available for years to come.
I do think we'll make it permanent later this year, Joe. It just makes sense. I mean, we're going to cut childhood poverty in half. We don't need to raise taxes to make it permanent.
I just can't imagine that even the most conservative lawmakers will want to pull the rug out from under that.
You're taking a little extra care and love.
In the meantime, John and his group aren't giving up. Too many families are hungry.
And we run out of food and we have to turn people away sometimes.
Some of President Biden's most consequential actions since taking office have been executive actions. He announced all American troops will withdraw from Afghanistan by September 11th, and he has also taken some limited executive actions when it comes to guns. Within his first 100 days, he's ordered the Justice Department to issue new guidance within the next few weeks on ghost guns, stabilizing braces, and red flag laws. Ghost guns are handmade or self-assembled firearms that don't have serial numbers or follow traditional background check rules. Stabilizing braces make firing pistols easier, and red flag laws already exist in some states and allow law enforcement to take away guns from people deemed dangerous by a judge. Now, we've shown you what President Biden has been able to accomplish during his first 100 days, but what hasn't he been able to get done? His administration has faced criticism over immigration. We're on the border where there's frustration on all sides of the issue. When we come back. The White House History Shop helps document presidential history, and part of President Biden's legacy will be how he handles the situation at the border, as well as immigration, a subject area where he's received some criticism. New records have been set for the number of migrants at the border, particularly unaccompanied minors. In El Paso, Texas, we learned the frustration that some locals are having with the increase in migrants. Meanwhile, some immigrants in the area are frustrated more isn't being done to make them U.S. citizens. The U.S.-Mexico border. On one side, infrastructure that may look like your city. On the other, a completely different world.
I don't know where my life would be if I wasn't here.
Norma Irene Alvarez says unless you live here, you might not get it. Norma was born in Mexico, crossed the border when she was 5, never left El Paso, Texas, and is now a DACA recipient, which gives her the ability to work without fear of deportation. Life on the other side of the wall in Juarez is difficult, she says, to say the least.
People want what you have for a reason, because you are blessed, because they see in this country what they don't have back home.
While major border towns like here in El Paso, Texas are always busy, they are getting even busier. Why the big change? Well, some experts say it's in part to a new American president with more hospitable immigration policies. In March, 172,331 migrants were taken into custody at the border, the busiest month in nearly 2 decades. That number includes 18,890 teens and children who arrived without parents. Another record. When you walk the streets of downtown El Paso, you find some anxious and disappointed.
He's letting all these poor people come in. There's enough people here already, poor people.
If Juarez doesn't want you there, what do you think we do?
Immigrant advocates say our country can handle this, however. More temporary housing has been built. Dylan Corbett is with the Hope Border Institute.
For those who are fleeing persecution and danger, they have a right under federal law, under international law, to seek asylum at our border.
In recent days, President Biden has said he will increase the number of refugees over the coming months that are allowed to come to the U.S. legally. But he's not moving quick enough for some on immigration. The president promised to create a pathway for citizenship for DACA recipients like Norma, and so far, his immigration bill to do that doesn't have the votes in Congress to pass. Norma says all this means is more waiting.
I want my green card.
It's not just immigration and border frustration being felt by some. Some marijuana advocates are frustrated President Biden hasn't done more when it comes to cannabis, although national experts and national leaders say that will change soon.
These are two vegging plants, meaning they're not budding yet, they're just getting bigger and bigger.
To say Adam Eininger appreciates marijuana,
it's already dry,
is an understatement.
I can smell it through the mask.
The cannabis advocate grows it legally in his D.C. home. On 4/20, he even handed out joints in Washington to those who got their COVID-19 vaccine. Eidinger, over the years, helped pass marijuana decriminalization locally. His advocacy has even gotten him arrested at the Capitol.
Have I heard anything from the White House? No.
And that is what has made this progressive a bit frustrated. During the campaign, Biden released this commercial.
Decriminalize marijuana.
But so far, Eidinger says 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue has been too quiet.
We want the Democrats in Washington to keep their promise.
Adding to his frustration, this report from the Daily Beast that White House staffers have been suspended, asked to resign, or placed in a remote work program due to past marijuana use. The White House hasn't denied the story, saying the drug is still illegal at the federal level.
People voted for this administration fully expecting that they would respect cannabis users.
But what Eidinger doesn't understand is why the president doesn't take executive action. He believes President Biden on his own could deschedule cannabis and move it from a Schedule I drug, which is what cocaine and heroin is also classified as, to a Schedule II drug. That would change penalties. He could also remove the usage question from federal job applications.
The president does not have to wait for Congress to pass marijuana legalization or decriminalization.
While cannabis activists are no doubt a bit frustrated with the Biden administration so far, there's also hope that something with this plant and this policy will change soon.
You and I have been talking about this since about 2013, actually.
Democratic Congressman Ed Perlmutter of Colorado has been a nationwide leader on the issue and knows it's been talked about a lot, but not much has changed. Many members of Congress, after all, remain skeptical about long-term effects. He does believe, though, a key breakthrough is about to happen. Currently, dispensaries are banned from accessing banking services such as checking accounts, resulting in all-cash operations that can lead to break-ins and crime.
We have these piles of cash that are generated, and we want to get a safe harbor for it. A number of Republicans are in the Senate, are co-sponsors, so I really expect the Safe Banking Act to get through the House, to pass the Senate, and get to the White House.
So far, it's only passed the House, though. However, Eidinger remains hopeful, believing if one thing can change nationwide, everything else will follow.
I use cannabis every day.
Climate change and the environment are pressing issues for the Biden administration. But as we found out as we traveled the country, in some regions, changing policy is difficult to comprehend. Life out west can sometimes feel remote, but at the same time, uniquely beautiful.
And it's just a wonderful place to live.
Reverend David Wilson moved to Carlsbad, New Mexico over 20 years ago. From the sky, the town may look simple, but access to nearby national parks makes it anything but.
We have a sacred obligation to care for the earth.
But for the pastor, there is one view he cannot stand: the constant drilling and fracking on federal lands, not to mention the nearly daily afternoon flares.
You go on to Google Maps and look at a satellite image of this area, and you will see just a patchwork of oil sites.
But Pastor Wilson did receive, in his view, good news when President Biden took office. The president ordered a 60-day ban on new drilling permits on federal lands. Where does this impact? Well, take a look at this. All that red is federal land, mostly out west. Major oil and gas producing states like Montana, Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico are impacted in particular. For the pastor, it's a key first step.
The drive for money and profit and energy is at the cost of our environment.
Locals here, though, say there's an issue with this executive order. All of this federal land is ripe for development, and county leaders have been banking on the fact tax revenue will be coming in to fund local projects.
That created a significant amount of uncertainty.
Alan Davis is the local county manager. He says shutting down new oil and gas sites is like shutting off the local economy.
During the boom was the most active basin literally in the world.
How important is oil and gas to New Mexico and other states? Well, in New Mexico, drilling on federal lands contributed $707 million in 2020 to the state. That's 10% of the entire budget. Most of that money, Davis says, goes to schools.
That's the part of it that's concerning. Where else are those monies going to come from?
For the moment, Davis says his town is okay because President Biden's ban is temporary and it doesn't impact wells that are currently producing. But he is worried new permits will be limited going forward.
It would be a devastating effect.
Reverend Wilson says change is tough, but necessary.
It cannot be so wholly dependent on oil and gas.
So what's next on President Biden's agenda? We're talking about reforming the nation's infrastructure when we come back. President Biden has made clear that infrastructure reform is his next priority, and it's a debate that's expected to last most of the summer.
During the pandemic, you have seen crowding on buses.
Like millions of Americans, Ronald Thompson does not own a car.
This is where it's like the busiest.
Most days, even in a pandemic, he finds himself boarding a bus.
There we go.
Only to then hop on a train. Mass transit, in his case, Washington, D.C.'s metro system, is crucial for just living.
A lot of folks who travel to and from work and to school rely upon public transit to get there.
We'll expect debates over trains, buses, streetcars, and yes, bridges and roads to take place in the coming weeks. That's because Congress is debating how to introduce a major infrastructure bill to address the rust that's accumulated across the U.S. How much is this costing you? Well, listen to Casey Dinges with the American Society of Civil Engineers talk about damage to vehicles.
So that's costing the average motorist in this country over $1,000 a year at road conditions.
Some progressive Democrats want a comprehensive infrastructure package voted on by July 4th. Some moderate Democrats, though, are beginning to sound the alarm, concerned about spending trillions more after they just passed a massive stimulus bill. But one reason transportation advocates are optimistic is President Biden.
It is going to happen.
John Robert Smith is with Transportation for America and has been lobbying presidents for years. He believes the fact President Biden took Amtrak nearly every day for 36 years will be a key reason something changes, particularly when it comes to trains.
For passenger rail, we're so lucky to be working on the president's favorite project. Today, you cannot leave an economy marooned with only the personal automobile as the way to get in and out of the place where you live.
Some projects he believes could happen include new train routes from places like Colorado Springs to Denver, or even Cincinnati to Cleveland. But how will it be paid for? Well, right now, President Biden wants the corporate tax rate raised. But as William McBride, an economist with the Tax Foundation, says, you don't have to be the CEO of a company or make six figures to potentially feel that impact. If the company you work for has to pay more in taxes, well, it could be passed on to you.
It's going to put pressure on the ability of employers to provide raises. It's going to put pressure on the ability of employers to hire, to promote.
As for Ronald, he just hopes Congress does something bold soon, beyond fixing a few potholes.
How do we fund the things that we know work?
As we mentioned, the president's plans for infrastructure go well beyond roads and bridges. Coming up next, we'll take you to small town USA and how they could benefit from improvements to their water systems. It's not just big cities like Washington that could potentially benefit from a major infrastructure overhaul. Small towns could as well, particularly when it comes to fixing their water issues. To find out how serious this country's water problems are,
come on in.
It helps to speak with an engineer. And when it comes to reforming infrastructure, why not go to a town where it's literally in the name? Jonathan Bonner is in charge of water in Reform, Alabama.
So this is actually the well itself.
Bonner, who's been an engineer for 37 years, is explaining to us the infrastructure crisis that's facing his town and cities across the country.
It's in pretty rough shape right now.
His problems going well beyond physical rust or the duct tape. The city recently filmed what it looks like underground. That crud isn't supposed to be there, and while it gets filtered out before it reaches homes, it's still a sign things are getting worse.
They're relying on me. They're relying on the city to make sure this works in order to give them good, safe, clean drinking water.
Recently, Bonner's felt the pressure. In January, a car crashed into a hydrant, completely draining the town's water tank. Weeks later, cold weather created 21 separate leaks. Again, the town's water was gone. The worst issue may have been in October when this plant caught on fire. Bonner had to call the fire chief and actually tell him this.
Y'all are either going to have to stop putting water on your fire, or the town's not going to have any water.
What's happening here is happening across the U.S. The American Society of Civil Engineers estimates a water main break happens every 2 minutes somewhere in this country. In fact, so much treated water is lost every day through leaks and bad pipes. 9,000 swimming pools could be filled. At Sweet Tea's restaurant, customers telling us you don't appreciate water until it's gone. Some people here went weeks without bathing.
The showers, cooking food, the children brushing their teeth, simple things we take for granted.
Water, a key part of the debate beginning to unfold in Washington. President Biden wants to raise corporate taxes, which many Republicans say is risky economically, to pay for infrastructure reform. He wants to spend $111 billion on fixing the country's water supply.
The whole town was out of water.
That is a debate Reform's Mayor Melanie Davis will be paying attention to. She says her town doesn't have the money to fix this alone.
That's another hiccup that we are facing, money. It's hard to find funds.
As for Bonner, he'll keep doing what he can. Sadly, before we ended our interview, I showed him this hole and unknowingly exposed another problem.
Thank you for noticing it. So what I've got is, I believe a storm sewer has collapsed.
Technically, President Biden has 1,461 days to accomplish his agenda. But if these first 100 days are any indication, the rest of his term will be busy and impactful for all Americans. In Washington, I'm Joe St. George. Thanks for watching.